The billionaire came home early that night, his luxury car gliding silently through the iron gates of his mansion, unaware that inside those walls a nightmare was unfolding. As soon as he entered the house, before even calling out, he heard a horrifying sound, a sharp slap followed by a cry of pain and a desperate plea for mercy. His heart lurched as he rushed toward the servants' wing, and what he saw shattered him to his core. His wife was standing over his black adoptive mother, violently yanking her by the collar of her worn dress and forcing her to scrub the marble floor with bare hands already raw and bleeding. A bucket of dirty water had been deliberately overturned beside her, soaking her clothes while the wife kicked the bucket again in rage, screaming insults about her filthy background, about her place in the house. The older woman, trembling and humiliated, struggled to keep scrubbing while tears ran down her face, whispering apologies she did not deserve to give. The billionaire stood frozen at the doorway, watching his own wife punish the woman who had given him life when the world had abandoned him. Then his wife struck her again, harder this time, just as his shadow fell across the room. The moment she turned and saw him standing there, her face drained of all color. The crushing sound of the bucket echoing across the floor was the only noise in the room as the truth stood fully exposed. He rushed to his mother's side, catching her trembling form as if she were made of glass, feeling the heat of her tears and the cold of the floor beneath her. In that instant, he was pulled back to memories he had carefully tucked away, the cold nights in the overcrowded orphanage, the hunger gnawing at his belly, the despair pressing down on a 6-year-old boy who had no one and no hope. And then her face appeared in his mind, a beacon of light and warmth among the shadows. Her skin dark, her eyes deep pools of patience and kindness, her hands worn but steady, her smile gentle yet resolute. She had chosen him when the world had abandoned him, had brought him into her home despite her own poverty, despite the exhaustion etched into every line of her body, despite the sacrifices she made silently, without recognition or reward. She had given up sleep, comfort, and even the small joys of her own life to ensure he could eat, could learn, could dream. Many nights, she had gone without food so he could have his portion. Many mornings, she had dressed him in clean clothes while herself wearing tattered rags, and whispered stories of hope that seemed impossible to believe at the time. It was because of her tireless love, her endless work, that he had become the man he was now, the billionaire who commanded attention and power in boardrooms and cities across continents. And yet, in the years following his success, distance had grown between them, not in love, but in habit. His work consumed him, his ambition blinded him, and the world he built seemed so vast that it obscured the woman who had made him. Then came his marriage to a woman of beauty, wealth, and social clout, a woman whose every smile and gesture seemed perfect in public, yet concealed an insidious judgment in private. She could not tolerate the presence of the woman who had raised him, the woman whose dignity and integrity made her own superficial status seem hollow. Behind closed doors, the kindness his adoptive mother deserved turned into the harsh punishment he now witnessed. The realization of this betrayal cut deeper than the slap, more painful than the physical marks on her hands and knees. He saw clearly now that this cruelty was not an isolated incident, but the result of months, perhaps years, of resentment, silent aggression, and simmering hatred that had been allowed to fester unchecked in the very walls of his home. The billionaire's hands shook, not from fear but from a tidal wave of anger and grief that had been building for years. He stood over his wife, his presence commanding the room, and every ounce of his authority radiated through the silence. His voice, though calm, carried the weight of a storm, and when he spoke, each word landed with surgical precision. "Do you understand who you've harmed?" he asked, his eyes burning with controlled fury. His wife recoiled, stammering, I was only teaching her discipline. I was." He cut her off with a glare so sharp it could have carved stone. "Discipline? You call striking her, forcing her to kneel in filth, and humiliating her discipline? This is abuse. This is cruelty. This is sin." He gestured toward his adoptive mother, who was sitting on the edge of the chair, still trembling but now staring up at him with a mix of fear and hope, her hands clutched together in a silent plea for mercy that she did not deserve. "Do you realize who this woman is? She saved me when I was 6, when I had nothing. She sacrificed her body, her health, her sleep, her very life so that I could live. And you," His voice cracked with rage. "You dared to punish her in my house? You dared to raise your hand against the only person who truly loves me unconditionally." His wife's lips quivered, but she had no words, no excuses, no defense strong enough to survive the fury of a man who had watched the one he loved most suffer at the hands of someone who pretended to care. With a single deliberate call on his phone, he summoned his private security, his legal team, and the local authorities. Within minutes, the once grand mansion became a stage for justice. Officers, lawyers, and guards arrived, transforming the space from a luxurious home into a courtroom of reckoning. She screamed, she cried, she fell to her knees, she clawed at the floor, she begged him for forgiveness, but each plea only made the sentence heavier, each tear a reminder that she had already destroyed any claim to compassion. Her diamonds, her silks, her carefully constructed image of perfection, all meaningless now, as the empire of privilege she had believed untouchable crumbled around her. The humiliation was absolute. She was removed from the mansion, escorted through halls she once commanded, stripped of the power she thought she possessed, left only with her shame and the echoes of her cruelty. Meanwhile, the woman she had tried to break, the adoptive mother, remained seated, fragile yet unbowed, held in the protective arms of the son she had raised. In that moment, the billionaire understood a truth far more profound than wealth or power. Strength is measured not by what you own, but by what you protect, and cruelty can never withstand the force of love that is absolute and unwavering. He stood over the empty space where his wife had once ruled, and for the first time, he felt the immense weight of responsibility, not to his empire, but to the people who truly mattered, those who had given him life, love, and purpose. After the doors closed behind his wife forever, an eerie, profound silence enveloped the mansion, a silence that felt both heavy and cleansing. He carried his adoptive mother to the master suite, lifting her with the same care one would handle fragile porcelain, and laid her gently on the bed, brushing back her hair as though each strand carried the weight of her sacrifices. He knelt beside her, holding her hands in his, letting the silence stretch between them while his tears fell freely, unashamed. He apologized over and over, not just for that night, but for all the moments he had been absent, all the times he had allowed ambition to pull him away, all the years he had unknowingly permitted her suffering in silence. She whispered softly, shaking her head, telling him that every sacrifice, every tear, every night spent working herself to exhaustion had been worth it, simply to see him live, succeed, and become a man of honor. And yet, he could not ignore the guilt, the realization that money and power had allowed the cruelty to happen under his roof without consequence until now. Over the following days, the scandal spread across society like wildfire, shattering his wife's carefully curated reputation and ensuring her legal downfall. But beyond the headlines, beyond the gossip, a deeper transformation occurred within the billionaire himself. He reassessed his life, his empire, and his purpose, vowing never to let wealth or ambition overshadow justice, compassion, and love. He began establishing foundations, shelters, and educational programs in his adoptive mother's name, ensuring that no elderly woman, no domestic worker, no vulnerable soul would suffer abuse in silence. Every evening thereafter, no matter the deals, the accolades, or the pressures of his empire, he returned home early, not as a businessman obsessed with status, but as a son, a protector, a man devoted to righting the wrongs of a world that too often ignored the suffering of the innocent. Together, he and his adoptive mother restored the home, not merely as a residence of luxury, but as a fortress of dignity, respect, and justice. They filled it with laughter, warmth, and light, a living testament to resilience and the power of love that never falters. In every hallway, every corner, every room, the story of that night remained, not as a scar, but as a reminder that courage, honor, and unwavering loyalty could triumph over cruelty, and that true wealth is measured not in riches, but in the lives one protects and uplifts. And in the quiet moments, when the city outside glimmered with lights and the world seemed indifferent, he would look at his mother and remember that the greatest legacy a person can leave is the love and protection they provide to those who gave them everything.